Margarita. Hello.
Hi. Are you waiting on Brian and the mayor? Oh, there's Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Brian's hair.
Hi, Sergio. Hi, Margarita.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, my camera's all funky.
Yeah, no worries.
Cecil gave me a new monitor and it's really high up and he mounted the camera on the top. And so now it's a weird angle. So
Yep.
I have to get this all adjusted. Thanks for making time to meet with us, Sergio.
Of course. I'm glad we were able to make it happen.
This is sort of fun committee because it's good to be up on this legislation. Helps in so many areas to be able to talk when you're at other meetings and someone mentions a Senate bill or Assembly bill, or you get a call from a legislator that wants you to support it. So
Absolutely.
Margarita and I enjoy the legislative part of it. So even though it's work, it's the fun part of the work, sort of.
Yeah, and great work, Margarita, on putting together the matrix and all the work that went into this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I also worked closely with the Santa Clara Cities Association that also has a legislative meeting today. So the staff members, we got to kind of share what bills we were tracking. And so the city of Campbell was kind of looped in and represented in those conversations. And
yeah, that's great.
It's a good partnership.
Excellent. So we're waiting for Liz to join us.
Yes. Yeah. So great news about the stimulus bill.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Sergio?
Yep. Oh yeah. Been following that closely and yeah, really great to see. And they moved up the signing by a whole day.
Not only did our local share get restored, but apparently the population estimates increased our share by about another $19,000. So
yeah, I saw.
Hello.
Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. I'm sitting here reading material and all of a sudden goes, oops, it's 1:30.
Yeah. a lot of material going, a lot of resources about this one. I've got a whole stack here.
Good, good, good. I was just going to look and see, did I send the Excel spreadsheet before we begin the meeting? Did I send the Excel spreadsheet from the Cities Association?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
And I was sharing earlier with Councilmember Lopez and Brian that I worked with Andy. So I saw that spreadsheet as it was being developed. And
Thank you.
I was able to take kind of, not all those bills are applicable to Campbell. So I just, it's the bills that I felt were applicable. Yeah. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it does have the benefit of being referenced against the Cities Association. And and I may have missed some or just didn't understand the implications to our city on some. So yeah, it is a helpful.
Okay.
I mean, it's very long, right? They're tracking a lot more than.
Oh, yeah, yes,
We are.
yes, very much so. But there are some on there that I think we do want to touch.
Okay, great.
So I'm looking for my agenda. Did you send the agenda?
Yes, Diana, I did yesterday because I had the desk items. So there was an amended agenda. Yes, sent out late yesterday.
That's what I thought, but now I have to find it. Sorry, apologize for not being quite on top of it.
And it's also accessible via our website.
Okay, I forget about that. Margarita. Yes, because you modified it. Yeah, that's what I thought.
You want us to resend it to you, Liz?
No, I have it. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I had it. I needed to, well, that's the thing on the two desk items from Councilmember Landry, but you sent a revised agenda.
Cecil, can I, or do I have the ability to share my screen? Because I have everything up and I can just share the agenda. And
That would be good.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
can I share my screen so I can share the agenda?
Yes, yeah, that's all on now, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna attempt to do that. Well, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, so then we have to officially open the meeting.
No, I think Cecil can enable it for us.
Okay. All right.
Or Brian, I think you might have universal screen sharing rights.
I do. Let me open it. I can do that. I just closed it, but I just had it open in my.
I don't see, I see the subcommittee from you.
I got it here.
Attached review committee, what am I
And
looking
then
at?
it's linked. It says amended agenda. There's a link in that email. If you have the email I sent open.
Here, I got it.
Okay.
That's what I thought I had, but
Nope. Cecil, you've disabled our screen sharing.
oh, I see. That's why it's a link.
It's a link, yeah.
Thank you. I totally missed that. So how do I make that link work? There we go. I know I looked at it yesterday. Okay. So now that I'm somewhat organized, I hope everyone else is. So let's do this. Let's go according to protocol and say, to protect our constituents and city hall officials and city staff, the city requests all members of the public following the guidance of the California Department of Health Services and the County of Santa Clara Health Officer order to help control the spread of COVID-19. This meeting is being held via telecommunication and is compliant with the provisions of the Brown Act and Executive Order N2920 issued by the governor. The following subcommittee members are listed to permit them to appear electronically or telephonically at the legislative subcommittee meeting on Thursday, March 11th, 2021. Liz Gibbons and Councilmember Sergio Lopez. Members of the public will not be able to attend the meeting at the City Council chamber physically. The legislative subcommittee meeting will be live streamed on YouTube. Public comment for the City Council subcommittee meeting will be accepted via email at the clerk's office prior to the meeting. And then I think we can take calls, right? We can take.
Right.
Okay. So those who have dialed in can do, was it *9? And those from the public, they can raise their hand. Is that correct?
Yes, and we have no one from the public that has submitted any communications or attending at this point.
Great, thank you very much. And so I therefore call this meeting to order. And I will go through the order of comments here. And do we have any public comment? And understanding that there are no members of the public on this call, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting and go to the new business, which is item number 1, the 2021 state legislation bills to watch, recommended action, review and discuss proposed legislation, and provide direction to staff. So with that, getting us started, I bring you back here. There you go. Margarita, before you begin discussing the bills that you've highlighted in your attachment, thank you very much. I thought it would be useful to, because we haven't had this group join for the legislative subcommittee, that it would be helpful to go back over what this subcommittee is all about, and help us keep focused on what we want to do in terms of communication with the council, and then what we as a subcommittee can take action on. So basically, did everyone receive from Margarita earlier the copy of the legislative advocacy? Okay, Sergio, are you okay with that? Okay. So
Cecil, are you online, Cecil?
Yes, I am.
Can you enable our screen sharing, because I have a couple of documents that may be helpful to screen share.
Okay, so it is enabled, but what I can do.
I got it.
Okay.
It works now.
Oh, good. Okay.
okay, thank you, Margarita. Perfect. So I'm gonna fix my screen here. And so the purpose is that the legislative advocacy principles principle is to authorize the city's position on legislative bills in a timely manner. This has always been something that we've been concerned about, Sergio, is being actively engaged in a timely manner rather than after the fact. So this committee was, and this document was reworked a couple times and approved, I think, in July of 2020. So that's what it's intended. So the committee itself, what we're supposed to do here is we'll meet during the legislative year as needed. The subcommittee can recommend to the city council a legislative and policy platform that establishes the city's legislative priorities for that calendar year. And I've sent out some past legislative priorities or platforms from Cities Association. One was from 2019, the other was from 2020. The Cities Association, pardon me, is meeting tonight for the first time. So I'll keep this committee updated on what it is that they're going to be doing, but I would assume they're going to be trying to do a similar type of letter that they've done in the previous years. Last year's letter, if memory serves, did mostly with housing, but in previous years, they've looked at other things. So I think we will want to do that as well. Okay, and under the policy scope, I thought this was important. If you want, can you slide that down, Margarita?
Yes.
Perfect. So we can, that's perfect. We can recommend positions on proposed legislation such that the legislation is consistent with the following guiding principles. Directly impacts the city's finances, responsibilities, legal authority, public safety and operations, increases or decreases local revenue, protects or reduces local control, is consistent with city's existing policies and current city council strategic priorities, or creates an unfunded mandate. And I think council was pleased with that description when we finally got there. This was really something to help us. So as we go through some of these lists that Margarita's put together for us, and perhaps take a quick look at some of the cities associations, help me if you would. I will try and refer back to these 5 principles to make sure. And then if we make recommendations to the council, we can refer back to those same policies. I think that would be helpful.
And Mayor,
Yes, please.
thank you. So that's certainly helpful, and I appreciate the need for that. And in keeping with letter D, I also requested from the city manager the most recent strategic priorities. So I've got them here. I know you're familiar as well, and so I've actually marked through the legislation and to see how much it is in keeping with one or more of those priorities. So ready to have that discussion as well.
Good. So the strategic priorities, which one did you give him, Brian? Did you give him the one from the general plan, from the budget, or did you give him something from previous years?
I just gave him the one that we did last May 22nd. Just those strategic priorities for the calendar for the fiscal year, not the overall budget ones that we were looking at.
Okay, so
from 19.
Okay, so just for clarity, I don't have that in front of me. Brian, if you could send that to me, that would be so. Sergio.
Yep, I'll do that right now.
Thanks, appreciate it. So Sergio, for your information, in the budget document, there is a strategic plan, and it is from 1999. And one of the things that we had hoped to do this year, the Vice Mayor and I had discussed with Brian, was trying to utilize some format of an update of that to take the place of doing strategic priorities in the way we've done it in the past.
I see.
I'm still hoping that that's going to be possible, and that may very well feed into some of our budget discussions.
Yeah.
But just as an FYI, so good. Okay. Let's see. So I think, yeah, so just going over the process, staff will prepare position letters for the mayor's signature on a legislative proposal. This was one of our problems in the past, is could the mayor sign, or would the mayor sign, and what needed council approval. So the goal was to simplify the process. If we came up with something that was a position paper, on various issues, and the council approved it, then the mayor could, the letters could be written and the mayor could sign. That way they would get out in a very timely manner. A lot of times things happen quickly, and if you have to wait to get on an agenda and so forth, they just became of little or no value. So the goal is to be able to have the mayor sign letters. And we've had a few hiccups in the past, but I think that this will make it easier. So that's what I wanted.
Liz, if I could jump in, just the idea is that if it meets those criteria that's listed in the section above, affects local finances, affects local control, those things. The idea is that we would word the letters our opposition based on that criteria. It doesn't preclude this committee from addressing other legislation that may be outside of that. In those areas that may be outside of those subject areas or those impacts, or maybe there's additional impacts you want the council to cite, we would do that and follow the normal process of getting council authority on those bills that would be outside of that criteria.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, because I was thinking that we still needed to do a position memo on things, but you're saying that you're comfortable the policy scope would cover the ability of the mayor to send a letter?
Yeah, and I think, Margaret, if you scroll up can you scroll up to the section just a little bit more? Keep going. Keep going right there. City manager shall recommend council review and actions if the city manager determines the legislation is not consistent with these guiding principles above. Okay. In accordance with the council policy. So really, in working with you, if we feel like we're outside of that, or our letter needs to state something more specific than those broad categories. For instance, last year we'd write letters and say, we're opposed to this because it takes away local control. If we want to be more specific or something outside of that, then we probably want council buy-in. But if we're going to be referring to those general principles, this would authorize the mayor to go ahead and execute a letter on the city's behalf without the council's buy-in.
Okay. And I should say Councilmember Lopez. Councilmember Lopez, one of the reasons I wanted you on this subcommittee is that although a lot of things we will have the council and you and I will have a common opinion on, there may be things that we don't. So I thought it would be good to be sure that we had a viable discussion on those type of things. So please feel free. I'm looking forward to some conversations with you about some of these issues, and then we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, and I greatly appreciate that. Just in terms of process, this being my first meeting, is there's obviously a lot of bills in front of us. Are we usually able to get through them, or is there can we be able to make sure we move ahead on some if some bear further discussion? Just wondering how that's worked in the past.
So we haven't done this before quite this way. This
I
is
see.
the first time since the policy was set last July. We're doing, Margarita did a great job with putting together certain ones. I think what we should do is go through the ones that she's pulled together. And then you may have some additional ones. I may have some additional ones. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a learning experience on how we become effective on this. And I think if Margarita is agreeable, I think we'll just have her go through her list. There is a lot on her list clearly, but there's also a lot more. So, and also next week, on the 18th, I know you can attend. I'm sorry, I cannot. I might be able to listen on the phone, but I can't attend. Is the league's, what is it, Cal Cities now, is going to have their presentation. So it's always very informative as well. So I'm thinking that we'll set up a meeting probably in 2 weeks.
Great.
To go over what that presentation did, what we've learned from today, and cover any loose ends. That's my guess is what we'll do. But we can
Great.
Yeah, and just a little bit of a help is Margarita put this together and we looked at these. It is a work in progress as the year goes. What we try to do is, one, get a feel for bills that the league is tracking, get a feel for bills that the Santa Clara Cities Association is tracking. And then through our other professional associations, through the City Managers Association, if I hear things, or through your associations, whether it's on VTA or Cities Association, if you hear things that is important, by all means, we try to add those, but it's really a composition. And so this is really our first snapshot at that. There may be more that we're missing. There may be some that we could take out over time. But the work in progress is kind of pushing and pulling on this list from different sources, and your experience and what you're hearing and your committee appointments and things that may be important, as well as Liz and Margarita and I as well.
Right, and my first ABAG meeting on this is also next Thursday, the 18th as well. So
great. And yeah, I'll be attending the League of Cities. I know the City Association is meeting tonight, so just want to make sure we're able to capture that as well. So that sounds great. I'm certainly willing to.
As we go through this, in my mind, I'm kind of thinking, what do we oppose? Let's flag those that we have a problem or a concern about, or those that we want to watch. And then as we make that decision, if we're going to take an opposition or support, how does it fall into that criteria? Or do we need to go back to the council and get authority to oppose or support it? So
yeah.
And kind of those two questions.
Right. And at the same time, as others have stated, just want to make sure we're able to be part of the conversation, and some of these are moving quickly.
Right. That's exactly, yeah, right. That we've learned our lesson. So hopefully this process will help us do that.
Great.
Okay, so Margarita, why don't you go ahead and
apologies, Brian, maybe it'd be helpful to just briefly state the priorities that I know you sent them to the mayor, but would That'd be
Yeah,
helpful.
yep. Liz, you should have those now.
Oh.
So our priorities that we looked at last year, just really quickly for the group, are comprehensive long-term land use planning. It listed things like general plan update, Barrier 2050, and reviewing legislation, keep the council and the community informed about state legislation. That's what we're doing today. Another priority was Measure O implementation, police and library construction. There is a bill, AC1 is sort of related to that in that it lowers the percentage vote for GO bonds. Although we're not going out for another vote probably. The third priority is fiscal stability. Fourth is financial recovery, and fifth is open space.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I think all of that's pretty straightforward. We'll be going for that. Good. Okay.
And then Margarita, if you want to highlight these, but I've taken notes too. If you want me to jump in or there's any question you have on what these are as you go, just nod and I'll pick up.
Sure, I'm going to do a very broad overview and to take you up on that. So I've talked to the city manager about how I really appreciate his support and kind of guidance on the legislation subcommittee, because he is not only understands legislation very well as an attorney, but land use. Well, in my opinion, he knows land use very well, also wearing his planning hat. So it's a good combination here. So as anticipated, given last year's heavy focus on housing, we also have a larger number of the bills that we flagged are in the housing arena. Out of all the bills that we've flagged here, 16 of them are housing related, including SB 9 and SB 10 that Livable California and some other of the organizations have already been kind of very heavily lobbying against. Yesterday we received from one of the city managers associations a request for support on SB 765 regarding the ADUs. Once again, we know that the land use and its imposition on local controls and how we establish that is something that the city would likely want to take a position on. The next category we have is transportation. One bill that I flagged here because it's very much it relates very pertinent here in our county. It has to do with BTA with the board of directors. There's been a lot of publicity.
Oh yeah, there's been a lot.
Yeah. So we thought I wanted to put that to your review and attention. Broadband, also especially with the pandemic, really highlighted the need for broadband access, affordable access, a good connection. So there's I think this is for me kind of new in terms of where I've been seeing kind of the applicability of these like larger broadband bills, even in small communities like Campbell or communities that are already well connected, like Silicon Valley communities. Similar that I think is unique to these post-pandemic times are these bills that are discussing open meeting requirements, the ability to continue to provide for residents to call in or provide a telecommunication comment has become a very popular and an opportunity to open public participation. So I think this legislation will want us to continue that. I know as a city that we are already planning on doing that, but I think this is these types of bills highlight kind of the ways that we had to adjust to doing business this past year and how we're going to continue to do that going forward. And then there's a category, the revenue taxation, the bill flagged by Councilmember Lopez, and he did receive communication from Senator McGuire's office asking for either participation or testimony in support of. So this bill is here for your consideration. Another bill in the energy category has sponsored by our own Assemblymember Lowe. And at this moment, it's a spot bill. The content of it hasn't been filled in yet, but they're anticipating that will happen in the next week or so. But it's generally what we've been briefed on is that it's going to increase reporting for the investor-owned utilities, as well as possibly some language in there regarding compensation as to what happens when we have these prolonged outages in severe weather catastrophes, such as like when it was, a heat wave and we had 3 to 5 days of no electricity, and what that looks like from a compensation perspective for the customers. So those are our broad categories. I'm going to go back to the land use, and here, Brian, I'll let you.
Well, if I may just interrupt for 1 second.
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez, are there any particular ones that you want to recommend in addition?
Not at this point. I do have another question before we go on as well.
Sure, go ahead, ask your question, and because I do want to add one.
Brian, this is just looking at the broadband category. I flagged with you and Bill before. I raised questions around wanting to avoid any potential conflicts, given that for my day job, one of my clients is in another region, but a broadband provider. I might recommend tabling this until a future meeting so I can get an official opinion from Bill. Brian, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, probably best. And we didn't think about this. We were talking,
Yeah.
Liz, about conflict and some of Sergio's subcommittee appointments.
Yes.
And committee appointments, and Bill and Sergio were meeting on that. But I don't know that we addressed this committee in the position on broadband related issues. And I hadn't thought of that, Sergio. So
yeah, not for that, just because there's such a broad range of topics that could come up. But yeah, I'd prefer to speak with them specifically on that one.
Yeah, so perhaps the suggestion is that we just abstain from the discussion on the broadband category at this at today, till we have a chance for you and Bill to talk about these. I'm not sure, looking at them, there's a direct financial conflict to take a position to oppose or support these.
I could certainly make the case, but I'd rather, my recommendation would be to discuss with Bill, just over abundance of caution.
I agree, and that's the right approach, because it's your personal liability, not the city. So would that be okay to you, Liz?
That brings up another issue. I actually wanted to make sure that Sergio, and maybe you're doing it via Brian and Bill, but I think you need to do it directly with the attorneys for each of your committee assignments. I was specifically thinking about ABAG. I think you need to check and make sure that you don't have a conflict of conflict of interest, because it's not only you, it's also your business, your employer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might be effective for you to contact the attorneys for all of the committee appointments outside of Campbell, the outside ones.
Yeah, okay, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think then and if you can get a written opinion, that way nobody has anything to be uncomfortable about.
Absolutely.
Good. All right. I'm looking for the number of a bill that I want to add. It's another energy bill. Let's see.
So Margarita, are you taking notes?
I am.
So we'll defer discussion on the broadband. Excuse me.
Thank you.
That's
We'll defer
fine.
discussion today on the broadband section until we can clarify potential for conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
On that, just for our notes.
Yeah. And I know I have it here. Just 1 second. I'm usually more organized, but at this point, for some reason, I'm not. There is a bill that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is sponsoring, along with an assembly member on energy. And I just wanted to get you the exact number. It has to do with the PCIA, divulging the PCIA. And I'm going to say it's 612 in my memory, but I wouldn't swear to it until I. All right, I know it's here. I'm just looking at the slide that it's in. All right, one more. Oh, I was right. SB 612. Okay, and we can talk about that, but that is one that we definitely want to talk about and ideally support. Okay. Okay. All right, so go ahead, Margarita. You're going to have Brian speak on some of these.
On the housing section.
Yeah, I could touch base on any or all of these if there's interest. I don't want to go through line item by line item if there's no interest in that, but is there specific ones you want me to address?
Well, I think it's helpful to go through, again, this is our first time through this.
Yep.
So I think we've got a little bit of a learning curve to go and see what your take is, what our take is.
I can give you the Reader's Digest version, and then if we want to do a deeper dive, we can do that. Let's start with the first one, AC1. I alluded to that in my introductory comments. That is changing the threshold for votes for ad valorem taxes to be added, voter approved, much like we did when we did our geo bonds. That required a 2/3 vote. This would change that threshold to 55%. And I believe there was a similar bill last year that did not make it through, that did the same thing.
Yeah, I think partially because of COVID. This
Yep.
is one that's had a long-standing history, Councilmember Lopez, of support from cities.
Yeah.
So,
And I note that the very first point on the housing position paper you sent from the city association refers to that one.
so that one is the kind of thing that I think we would be very comfortable sending out a support letter for.
Well, and I think it directly reflects on government finances and would support if we needed to do indebtedness to be able to get a 55% vote. That 2/3 threshold with the geo bonds was hard to get there. So that certainly would be financial gain for us.
Yeah,
Okay.
certainly relates to, I think, a number of our priorities.
Yes.
So agreed. I think a good example on this one is for follow-up from Margarita, we might want to, depending on the cities association tonight, determine when is the appropriate time and to whom and how to communicate our support for this.
Okay. So I'll kind of flag it for support, recommended position support. And the way that the new, the way position letters are now submitted to the state legislature, it automatically populates where your letter goes to depending on the bill. So there's like a drop down and you say, SB ACA1, and then it automatically populates where it's going to go to. So usually it's based on how, what committee it's being heard in or what house it's in. And there's always a copy to the bill sponsors, which is very helpful.
And then we want to make sure that our local legislators are also included in that drop down, however that works.
Yeah, usually what I've done is that I just forwarded onto them from me, like coming from
Perfect.
like my email. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
All right. The next one's AB 59. It has to do with the posting and the notice requirement for fee increases. And basically the process before was 100, that we had to do it for fees within 120 days. Now this changes the mailing and the notice to it be at least 45 days from the previous notice. It increases our notice requirements for fee changes.
But it's more complicated than that, I believe.
It also makes it, I had to do a bit of research on this one. It also makes it so that there's more that the developers can appeal. So it's essentially just making it harder for us to collect fees.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's more that they can appeal, but it also, the benefit is that it sets a hard deadline for their appeal on all of those issues, so it's not an open-ended. So after you get past that 120-day appeal period, but you're right, Sergio, it does allow more things to be appealed in there. So
Here, sorry, go ahead, Sergio, please finish.
Thank you. Just to clarify, so currently it's an open-ended process, Brian, just trying to understand the change and impact.
So right now, and I have to dig in to give you more specifics, but right now it sounds like That appeal period is between 90 and 120 days, depending on the type of fee that's being imposed. This is clarifying that it's a 120-day period across the board on all fees. So in some cases, it may be an increase, some cases it may be the same time period, but it does allow more things to be appealed. And then it also requires us to post the notice 45 days in advance versus 20 days or whatever is currently required. I think it's 20 days.
So if I may offer, on the Excel sheet from the Cities Association, there's a fairly good description. And it says the current law also provides that an ordinance, resolution, or motion provides for an automatic adjustment in a fee or service charge, which is relevant during our budget process. And the adjustment results in an increase in the fee or service charge. Then any action to attack, review, set aside, void, or annul the increase to the commencement within 120 days of the increase. This bill would increase for fees and service charges and for fees for specific public facilities, the time for the mailing of the notice of the time and place of the meeting to at least 45 days. So this, it doesn't apply this year, obviously, but it's really important to track this one in the long run. And I'm not totally sure if we want to support this or not, but it looks complicated to me, because if we have, which I believe we do in several areas, automatic increases, cost of living, or what is it, CIP, not CIP, the automatic increases every year.
CPI.
This would be a significant trigger because of the timing and so forth. So I think this one is relevant and potentially concerning.
Yeah, I get your concern. In reality, I don't know in my time here we've ever received any appeal on fees or any challenge to them, but it certainly clarifies that, and so that you're not off the hook by having these automatic updates, that you're on the hook if that fee is illegal, violates the Mitigation Fee Act, that you're not off the hook by having automatic updates. I think that's just trying to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, so I agree that this one is important to make sure we understand and follow up on, and we'll see what they say at Cities Association tonight.
So we'll certainly mark this as, if that's appropriate, as a watch.
Okay.
And Sergio, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd, the League of Cities will watch out for this one too. I think kind of a wait and see approach makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. The next one I didn't have a lot of update on. It's just and we'll have to dig deeper if you want more information. Establishing a revenue source. I wasn't clear on what that revenue source was without digging deeper. That would be my question of where's that money coming from? Is it an increase in tax? Is it taken away from our property tax? Or any sort of revenue source that we currently have? That would be my question.
Yeah, so all it says here is this bill would create the Bring California Home Fund in the state treasury for the purpose of providing at least $2.4 million annually to fund comprehensive statewide homeless solutions. It does not clarify where the money comes from.
Yeah.
And just as an FYI, it may conflict with the legislation passed last year, which provides funding for a whole range of programs, including homelessness. So that one, I'll think of the number of it. So that this is one of those ones, Sergio, which I always try and pay attention to. A lot of times these bills at this stage conflict with existing legislation or each other. And this is one that BAFA, which is the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, which was set up by AB something by Chu last year. So that is specific to the Bay Area. BAFA is specific to the Bay Area. But if this is statewide, it could conflict. So just offering that as a FYI. Okay.
And it looks like this is it's from personal income tax law and corporation tax law. And it doesn't itself make changes, but it's taking revenue from changes that were made. But certainly appreciate that it could change or be updated as
So,
a such.
so you're saying it comes from what now, please?
Two sources: the personal income tax law and the corporation tax law.
So it
And
comes from the general fund.
yeah, and from changes that were already made to those laws at the state level, it's just earmarking, is my understanding, where the funds would go. And it does look like this was probably placeholder language before, and so it may not have been available. Margarita, when you compiled this, I'm looking at the latest bill text right now.
Okay. All right. So we'll keep an eye on that one.
Sure.
Next one.
All right, AB 115. This allows commercial sites to have deed restricted affordable housing at 20% without city approval. And there's some other adjustments for height limits, FAR, and density thresholds that would be implicated as well. So it basically allows the erosion of your commercial zoning that you typically zone because of revenue needs, and allows residential properties to be put there if they do 20% of the project as deed restricted affordable.
So on this one,
And there was something similar to this last year as well.
yeah, and there's another bill that, again, I think conflicts with this a little bit. Among these conditions, the bill would require that the housing development be subject to a recorded deed of restriction requiring at least 20% of the housing units to be affordable. That is potentially conflicting with the density bonus law, as well as the inclusionary ordinance laws. So that is interesting. And
Well, this, I don't know that it conflicts. Some of the provisions are different, but this would just allow the use to be put in. If they restrict that, it doesn't speak to whether or not they take advantage of the density bonus or inclusionary.
So it says here, let me read this and see. Would, notwithstanding any inconsistent provision of the city's general plan, etc., would require that a housing development be an authorized use on a site designated in any local agency zoning code or map for commercial use if certain conditions apply. Among those conditions, the bill would require the housing development to be subject to a recorded deed restriction requiring that at least 20% of the units have an affordable housing cost or affordable rent for lower income households. So to me, there's two concerning things here. And one, and again, I'm trying to, and I'm only reading this summary, not the law, the wording in the law, which Sergio may have an update on. It says that would require a housing development to be authorized use on a site designated in any local agency zoning code or map for commercial use. So I'm not sure I'm understanding.
So let's just take simplified. Let's just say that the Culinary Institute is zoned commercial, where the CIA is. We just talked about that property. Maybe just call it a fictional property that is zoned commercial. They want to come in and build housing. Right now, they would ask for a general plan amendment, which we would have to authorize. Then they would amend the general plan and the zone ordinance to allow the use of housing from commercial to housing. This would allow it without having to go through that process if they deed restricted 20%.
Right. So thank you. That's where I was heading towards, but not expressing clearly, because there's two components to this. One is the whole 20% business, but the other is that it does go around the general plan. So that I think is a big deal.
Yeah, this is a local control. I mean, clearly in the past, this is the sort of thing that we were concerned about. It just doesn't give us the discretion, the control that you would typically have for where you're zoning, where your commercial properties are. And really doesn't allow us to manage the balance between commercial revenue through sales tax or TOT that we would receive versus the benefit for low income housing. Certainly there's a benefit, but you may lose the whole commercial site and all they have to provide is 20% deed restricted and the rest could be all above moderate housing. Is that in best interest of Campbell? It may or may not be, but it just takes that control away from us.
So this is a good discussion because this is something that I think we could write a letter on. And although there are many pros to it, there are, according to our scope policy, that this is one that I think we would not support.
I could see areas where you would say it makes complete sense to have high density residential and the benefit of increased low income housing. That's certainly a public interest. But I could see other areas where you would say we really need in this intersection to preserve these commercial properties because this is our focal point along Hamilton, near the freeways.
But this is a blanket law that applies everywhere. So
That's the problem, is it takes that discretion away from the cities to figure out what that best blend is.
So Sergio, thoughts?
One question I have is how this would impact our the housing numbers that we can submit to HCD. If any commercial area could potentially under this law be turned to higher density housing, does that increase the numbers that we could submit?
So Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong. When we're talking about the housing element update, they go through and do a land use map throughout the whole city and identify all the parcels for where housing could go. And then there are assumptions and zoning changes to collectively come up with the 3,000 units that we have as our target for RENA. We usually go above that, usually 3,500 or something. And then when it comes to Brian, this is where you know from experience way more than I do. When you report, you can report housing units across the whole city in all categories, because we have the inclusionary ordinance, for example, where any project of 5 units or more to 10 units or more has to have inclusionary.
Yeah.
So we do get credit no matter where they are. If they're identified in the housing element or not, does not matter.
Yeah, it's two. One is the planning process, and that's an adequate site analysis. So when we do our housing element to get certified, we have to demonstrate we have enough adequate sites that are currently zoned or could be zoned. This is the snafu, Liz. We talk about implementation. Under current law, you have 2 years to zone something. So if it is commercial and you want to plan for it, you would have to indicate your desire to rezone that and then actually rezone it within 2 years to count it in your adequate sites inventory for purposes of getting your housing element certified, your planning document. Now, once that's done, the mayor is correct. When housing gets built, you do count all housing that gets entitled and all housing that gets built. And Tuesday night, you see that in our annual report. We just report all permits. So you do get credit for ones are built, but you don't get credit for them in the planning part unless you've zoned for it. So my guess is these commercial properties, unless we were committing to rezone them to allow for, as a matter of right, the residential use, that we wouldn't be counting them in our adequate site study.
Right, and that's,
Right, that's what I was getting at.
yeah. And that's one of the reasons why it's best to rezone at the concurrent time with your housing element. You don't want to deal with having a 2-year delay for certification of your housing element. You want it.
You would get certified, but the law allows you to delay the implementation up to 2 years and still be certified, as long as you conform. Now, that may all change. Legislation's changing daily, but
Yeah. It's not the normal practice. It's normally concurrent. Okay, so this is one that we do want to have some concerns about.
Sergio, would you agree that we should oppose it, or is this just a watch on the basis of local control, or do you want actual oppose this based on taking away local control?
I'm open to a watch,
I-
but I do kind of, get concerned that we don't, that's one of my questions getting at, get credit for those numbers. And if we were to rezone that wouldn't necessitate this law anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think want to be cognizant, we're not opposing something because it's proposing to increase affordable housing. That's a very noble thing to do. And I think we
Yeah.
want to encourage that. But the principle that this is going against is and it doesn't allow the city to decide where that's appropriate in our community and paints a one size fits all. And that's difficult for cities, as a traditional city role is to determine where it's best in the community.
Right. So if we looked at our policy scope, it does have a direct impact on the city finances in that it could put revenue at risk.
Yep.
And it does impact the ability of the city for local control, reduces local control, and it might do other things related to our strategic priorities. One of the challenges in these kind of broad brush ordinances or laws too is it doesn't speak to the ability to have open space and different types of things like that. So it's always so broad brushed and it's early in the definition of it, but I would be inclined to say that we don't support this. We can watch it, but I'm inclined to say that we may not want to support it.
So we'll indicate a watch for now. Does that sound appropriate, Sergio? And then we'll be ready to oppose or take a different action if we get more information.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
All right, we'll indicate that as a watch based on local control and city finance. All right, next is AB 215. It's a housing element bill. It basically allows HCD to report cities to the Attorney General if the city violates provisions of housing law. This kind of just takes existing law, the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, and adds those provisions in allowing HCD to report. Really 2 years ago, probably if you're looking in the past more than 2 years, HCD never had the ability to decertify, never had statutory authority to decertify the city's housing elements. And that was a major point of contention with cities for years, dating back 20 years on housing elements, when HCD, after they've certified a housing element, getting complaints from the public, the city somehow is subverting housing law, and HCD writing letters to the city threatening to decertify them. Liz, just because Goldfarb and Lippman, I've seen position letters from attorneys from Goldfarb and Lippman representing many cities, including Montesrino when I worked there, that argued that HCD never had any statutory authority to do anything other than certify cities. After it was certified, they couldn't enforce, they couldn't report, they couldn't uncertify. So last year that changed. HCD now has the authority to uncertify and report to the attorney generals. And what this does is fold in some additional Housing Crisis Act of 2019 and those bills into that category. The HCD has authority now to report on.
And Brian, do you have more background on the Housing Crisis Act?
I don't have my fingertips. We'll get it for you. We can. We'll send that. Marguerite, can you make a note to follow up on that?
Yes.
I don't have anything specific, but I believe it was a series of legislations from last year.
Yeah. This is just kind of catch up legislation, just putting that in the same class that HCD did had with the decertification.
Yeah, I think this is just catch up law, at least the way it's currently described. It's just catch up.
Yeah. All right. The next AB 617, probably not going to apply to us, but it provides cities broad discretion to transfer or sell off its allocation of regional housing needs to another city or county, and requiring that we report it to our COG if we do so. So this was a major sticking point In the past, cities weren't able to do it across counties. You could certainly do it within your county. If ABAG gave Santa Clara County their RENA share, we within our county could share. But this allows cities to individually, we could sell it to Fresno, we could sell it to other areas, and we'd have to report that to our COG.
So Brian, I agree with your explanation, except for the word sell. We have to pay.
Well, yeah, you're right. I probably described it would be sell. It would be, we'd be paying. You're right.
So sorry. So San Mateo, within San Mateo County, has tried to do this. They have what they call a planning collaborative. And one of the primary reasons for establishing that several years ago was to do this trading. In fact, they've all agreed to it, but no one has ever done it because nobody wants to pay to have another city take their allocation. The Santa Clara County Cities Association tried to do this early last year, and it was not successful. And one of the reasons that the outcome of that discussion was to join or establish their own planning collaborative and to work with San Mateo County on a joint planning collaborative to see if there's any way that there's a benefit to doing this, and also to keep each other informed of what you're doing on across city borders and across the county border. To me, this is really a cleanup, allowing, as Brian said, to go across counties as opposed to just within a county. But the viability of it, it's a great soundbite, but the viability of it is questionable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know it's going to directly impact because I don't see us affording be able to sell housing, and but this is a benefit. It allows greater flexibility to cities. So I don't know that we have to take a position on it. Certainly support cities, but
Yeah,
we can stay neutral on this.
I would agree. That'd be my inclination.
all right. The next is AB 1258.
So can I just check for a second, coming back, since this has been a kind of a learning meeting? Sergio, do you have till 2:30?
Oh no, I thought for some reason we had 2 hours.
Okay, all right, I'm good. Is everyone else good?
Yes.
Yeah, I had another meeting I was going to jump into in a few minutes, but I've already texted them to go ahead and proceed without me, so I'm good.
Okay,
I
all
see.
right, thank
It
you.
was our labor attorney, so it's probably, but I'll catch up. They're going to move forward without me, and I'll follow up with them.
No, I'm flexible.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to get through this first pass and
Yep,
learn
agreed.
each
Yeah.
other.
We
All right,
we do
so-
have. I see now it's an hour, but at least I blocked out 2 hours, so no problem.
All right.
Okay, I
We'll
do
just-
try and pay attention to time occasionally.
Thank you.
All right, so the next one is AB 1258. Basically says that the RENA allocation that ABAG comes up with, this would subject that to judicial review. And it hasn't been. There's been a presumption with ABAG that there's a presumption of validity, but this allows for some judicial review.
And that, of course, is hugely controversial at ABAG itself. There are several lawsuits that have been threatened by both sides. The Contra Costa County city governments is opposing how ABAG was distributing it, the methodology. Then there are housing advocates in San Francisco who are concerned about gentrification and loss of affordable housing. And then there are other collectives of affordable housing advocates that said the number should have been 770,000 as opposed to 440,000 or whatever.
Oh.
So all of the diverse opinions and groups want the ability to sue. I don't think it's a good thing because it would hold up any movement, any progress. I mean, whether you agree or don't agree, you've got to move forward. So this one I would be inclined not to support. I mean, we can keep a watch on it, but I think it causes more problem than it solves. And the number comes from the state. So,
I agree. I'm inclined to oppose. I think it adds more confusion and uncertainty to our process, and could hold up our housing element update. And for people on either side of the issue, there's no guarantee that anyone's going to get the outcome they want. It just extends the timeline. So I have concerns about that.
All right. So we said oppose.
oppose,
No.
I'm sorry.
oppose.
Yeah,
Oppose.
okay, I was just making sure I got clear on that. All right. AB 1401 would just prohibit imposing minimum parking requirements for both residential or commercial development if it's within a half a mile walking distance of public transit.
So Sergio, I'd love to know your thoughts on this one, because I definitely have thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly see the benefit. I think it's in line with a lot of the direction that we're moving in and just likely to go in anyway. I certainly appreciate the pressures it puts on local control as well. So it's open to hearing some of that discussion.
So my take is a couple of things. The first easy conversation, I think, is point one. In general, you don't have a lot of, think about downtown Campbell.
Mhm.
And downtown Campbell is subject to a fair bit of change in the years coming. We've got housing projects that are likely to happen, as well as some more intense retail development. Does the light rail, there is a bus route, which is not particularly effective. I think it runs every half hour. It's changed recently, so I'm not totally sure. The one going down Campbell Ave. And then there's the light rail. The city has no control over the bus or the light rail schedule. And recent indication supports that they keep changing it. They've changed the light rail and bus schedule, I believe, 4 times in the last 3 years. So it's very, very hard to tie parking to public transit. And if you think of that application in downtown Campbell along the light rail, our people going, I mean, Campbell's a walkable community. People walk downtown and they bike downtown. Do they take light rail or the bus to go downtown? Do they take light rail or the bus to go to the shops along Winchester, the grocery stores? Do they take light rail to go to the prune yard or the buses? And so I'm looking at the reality. The parking counts for half mile within transit walking distance has already been reduced. I forget the statistic, but it's already reduced. So it's this, I equate these kind of laws as being like smoking. You don't want people to smoke, so you create laws that say you can't smoke indoors or you can't smoke in a public park. So there's a word for it, of these kind of laws. And they're supposed to change behavior. Ultimately, all of this kind of no parking has more to do with greenhouse gas emissions. And what these laws are, I'm going to say 5 years out of date in that, and this is one of my pet conversation points, which won't surprise you. Silicon Valley Clean Energy has reduced the greenhouse gas emissions in Santa Clara County, in our territory, by 22%. Okay, and that's not recognized in the calculations yet. Fortunately, ABAG is proposing a review and recommended changes. What is it, SB 357, is that the one with the GHG controls? You know the one I mean?
612.
No, this is the old one from back, 15 years ago. This is the old one, which is the one that says, you have to have transit, you have to have housing near transit. That's the governing state legislation, and it's all related to greenhouse gas. And what it's not recognizing now is all the greenhouse gas that's been eliminated because of power, but also all the programs to reinforce EVs, and all of the programs to do, what do you call it? Charging stations, all the programs in state legislation to do solar panels on residential, all of the REACH codes, all of these things are coming together to substantively reduce the GHG. So to have rules, laws that talk about parking near public transit, it's missing the point. One is public transit isn't viable in most situations, in my assessment, but also it's not achieving the underlying purpose, which is the greenhouse gas reduction purpose. That's a long-winded explanation.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate the analogy to smoking. I don't think I disagree, and I just hate locking when, and this is getting in a broader discussion, but just being locked into an existing technology of cars, and that being the way that we used to get around. But certainly appreciate your point that about changing service levels. I also it's interesting. Another question that this gets into is that we also have people from the surrounding community that drive. I think to a large extent drive into Campbell and use the downtown, and that maybe that aren't walking like some of our residents are. So gets into different questions of who we're serving by keeping some of that.
Okay.
Who is parking serving?
Yeah, and different, but yeah, that gets in a whole other discussion of how we can serve the needs of the community.
Yeah, agreed.
So we'll just watch that bill.
So I'm opposed to it. I think that it has many, my classic phrase is unintended consequences. I think it has too many unintended consequences, and I think it would directly impact our revenue.
I'm
Could you say more about the revenue?
Well, if people can't find places to park, and as you just said, coming from surrounding communities, we have a lot of high-end restaurants, and if people find a place to park, they're not going to come, and we won't be able to keep our businesses, the clientele for the businesses.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a great point.
So is there, I know, Liz, you said opposed. Sergio, I'm hearing a little bit something different from you. What's the pleasure of the committee, or are we at a deadlock on that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the mayor makes some great points. I'd be open to maybe supporting it at a later stage. If
So
that
would
makes
you be
sense.
okay with a watch on that bill, get more information, and reconsider whether we oppose or support it?
I'd be open to that. I mean, I take very seriously the concerns, especially and one of our priorities is also financial recovery, and how are we making sure that our businesses can thrive, and not even getting into all the other.
Right, and I will say, like the Prune Yard, which has its built-in parking, they would get the business, and downtown could possibly dry up. It's an exaggeration to a modern thing.
So is the concern so more the commercial parking aspect versus the residential? This is pretty broad brush, so I'm hearing impacts on commercial. residential may not have that same impact, but certainly the financial impact's tied to the residential, the commercial parking.
Um, I think it impacts residential too. And that's where I would address my comment that if the underlying purpose of all of this parking legislation is because people are using outdated technology, i.e. cars, it's not that they're using cars, it's that they're using fossil fuel powered cars. And when you read legislation, that's not always clear, but that generally speaking is the motivation behind this. Some of it does have to do with traffic, but that argument is much harder to make because the public transit doesn't take people where they need to go. So I think it applies to residential, but I think it applies to residential requiring clarity of why they want to eliminate the parking.
I mean, and so this is for new construction, right? So Mayor, if I was understanding you, you're also raising concerns about how that area might be changing with new developments. Am I understanding that correctly?
So if I'm following you, there's several areas in our downtown. There's quite a few areas within a half mile of our transit stops.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that would be subject to being built without parking. Some of it would be commercial, and some of it would be residential.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there are already reductions in parking for residential within that same half mile radius. So further reducing it, I do not see the value unless the underlying purpose is to reduce greenhouse gases by getting people out of fossil fuel powered cars. And that is changing, but many, many things are changing to reduce our greenhouse gases.
I think part of the purpose is also just allowing more parking requirements add cost on for any new development, and so I think some of the discussion around this is also reducing those costs.
So I would agree with you. There's some other legislations that talk more to that. There's a general assumption that a parking space costs about $40,000. It's probably much more than that now, but that's been the number that's floated around the last year or so. There's no question that it adds cost to affordable housing. So is there a refinement of affordable housing and their parking spaces versus market rate housing? That's one thing. But two, it's often the case where low-income families need a car to get to their job.
Mm-hmm.
They're ones perhaps more likely than anyone because of the hours they work. There was a very good example in San Francisco last year about a dishwasher who worked until 2 a.m. and it took him to 5 a.m. to get home because of the owl service. So low-income people often need vehicles. So it's unintended consequences, two sides of a coin.
Yeah.
Never simple. This language right now is just explicit to eliminating it. And that's what makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Although I'll add, just to further complicate the discussion, that a lot of time that public transit for working people has been, actually held pretty steady during the pandemic. So they're also the ones using public transit, and some cases.
I will debate your information. We'll talk about it another time.
Okay. No need to get into all that, but I'm open to further discussion or potentially taking
when we can have wine.
I know. Might be a long discussion.
All right.
So
we'll watch that bill if that sounds appropriate.
And just a question. I don't know if this would be the one, but is there an opportunity for us to not necessarily opposed, but say we have these concerns. Could we, have
Yep.
to kind of have input or request changes be made?
Yeah, you'll learn that on Thursday with the league. There's a thing called support if modified.
Yeah.
Okay. Very common.
Yeah, and I'm not sure this bill is the one, but I'm very open to just us having more of a say in some of those conversations.
All right, we'll move along. SB 5 is a housing bond act that allows the state to sell bonds for homeless and low income. I don't know enough about that to brief you anymore on that. That's one that we can get more information on, but it's really the state selling bonds. SB 6, the next one.
So I may suggest on that one, we can talk about it more when people have had a chance to look at the Cities Association material.
Yeah, I think that is
Tonight's discussion.
that would be helpful. The next one is one that sort of conflicts. And Liz, I think that you're alluding to that with the commercial zoning one we already talked about. This bill would allow parcels that are within a commercial zone as an allowable use, just like in the previous bill, but the trigger is different in this one. It's they would have to meet or exceed the density appropriate for lower income households according to the local jurisdiction. So whatever our minimum density would be for a certain household, for low income households, so that would be 21 units per acre, 27 units per acre, or whatever that minimum density would be. The other trigger we saw in the other bill was dedicating by deed 20% of the development to be below moderate income housing. So this trigger would be a little bit different. I don't know that they're certainly inconsistent. You wouldn't do them both, but they both achieve the same thing in different ways. And I think we were saying oppose. Did we oppose the other one? I have to go back and look now. The other one we said we would watch.
Yeah. This one is another one of those tricky ones. Sergio, your thoughts at this point, just where you're.
I wrote down in my notes, I was hoping to get your view, Mayor, just because I know you've raised some good points before about the density bonus and how that's currently done.
Okay, so I'll just read what this one says. This bill designates a housing development project a parcel within a commercial zone, not adjacent to an industrial site, as an allowable use on a neighborhood lot if it complies with various requirements, one of which includes the density for housing development must meet or exceed the density appropriate for lower income households according to the local jurisdiction. So for what it's worth, we already allow this, but you do have to go through a zoning change. What this does is it bypasses there's another one, believe it or not, there's a third one. There's another one that says, it doesn't say, it allows it bypasses the general plan and the housing element.
Yeah.
And I'll just offer a thought. Why do you have an approved general plan and a state approved housing element if the government can rewrite laws that override the entire process?
Yeah, and this is very much like the AB 115 that we looked at on page 1. It basically doesn't require the city. It does affect local control because we no longer have control. They can do it on commercially zoned property. And the difference is the other one, you would have to deed restrict it because when it gets to the reporting issue, when we report to HCD, like we are next week in that the housing annual report, and we report below moderate income housing, those projects are either deed restricted, and so you can demonstrate by deed they meet that criteria. There's other instances where you do it by design, and some cities have gotten approval for that. But this allows, there's some provisions in existing law that says at certain densities, they're presumed to meet the criteria for below moderate income housing. And in jurisdictions our size, that category is 20 units per acre. So if we were to zone a property 20 units per acre and it were to be built at a density of 20 units per acre, under current law, we wouldn't have to deed restrict those in order to claim them as low income properties. We could rely upon that presumption because of state law. This kind of piggybacks on that notion where AB 115 on page 1 really took the other approach of saying you just deed restrict it and that's how you would demonstrate. So it's two different approaches to get to the same thing.
Yeah, and this one definitely seems to have a little bit more nuance, which I appreciate. And just looking it up, I see another key provision, which is that the development would be streamlined, and this is a Spurs analysis, if 50% or more of the sign has been vacant for at least 3 years. I'm not sure how much that would apply within Campbell, but definitely seems a little bit more narrowly targeted than the previous one.
Yeah.
And that's particularly important now that we've been dealing with COVID for over a year.
Yeah.
And we said we were going to watch AB 115. Maybe we watch this one too and try to sort out the nuances between them and determine if maybe these are support if amended, maybe these are opposed because they take away local control.
Yeah, I think they're at great risk. So I'm tending towards opposed, but I'm fine to say watch.
Your thoughts, Sergio?
I would agree, and I appreciate that it seems a little more thoughtfully written than just a blanket approach, but would be open to watching and open to opposing if that bears out.
Yeah, we'll note that for now, and we'll reference AB 115 because they're two similar bills that achieve kind of the same kind of takeaway of local control in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And Sergio, put in the back of your brain 20 units an acre.
Yeah.
I promise you I'll bring it up later.
Okay.
And there's been some talk, just so you know, Liz, I'm surprised we didn't see one this year to increase that to 27 units per acre. That presumption. But I didn't see anything yet this year. All right, moving on, SB 8 as a bonus density just lowers the threshold, both in the percentage and the number of incentives that they can get. And so this just expands bonus density law further. It certainly affects local control. So I'm not sure your thoughts on this one.
What does MOD stand for, Margarita?
Good question, I think.
Oh, I think they mean moderate income.
Oh.
I think they're referring to just moderate income.
Increases density bonus maximum to 50% for moderate. I have to read that in detail in the legislation to make sure I understand what that is. The bonus law has been changed, as staff indicated a couple of weeks ago. Was 35% maximum. It's now 50%, and there is legislation to make it 100%. The 100% legislation did not pass last year. The 50% did. So I'm not quite sure what they're getting at here.
Yeah, so this would reduce a lower income criteria. You'd have to do 17% instead of 20% currently. And if you did that, you would get, instead of two incentives, or you would get two incentives at 17% versus 20%. And then instead of 30% to get three incentives, that reduce that criteria to 24%. Yeah. That's just for lower income. And then the moderate is modified at 50%.
I got it. Sergio, one of the things that's really important, and I think I spoke to it ad nauseum on the Mozart project, I have tried to get this fixed at the state level and speaking to assembly members and senators. I got some traction, but not enough. And I tried at ABAG as well. We have, like most cities, have an inclusionary ordinance, which is 15%. If you get a 20% or a 35% density bonus, for example, and you do a certain combination of units like they did on Mozart, you get 35 additional units for 20% of the units. So it's not 15% plus 20%, it's 20% total. The 15% of the local inclusionary is absorbed into the density bonus. So what happens is, my favorite example is, if you have a 100-unit project, 15 of them are affordable in whatever proportion. If they go for density bonus, they get 135 units and only 20 have to be affordable. They increase from 85 affordable to 85 market rate to 115 market rate. They get 30 extra market rate units for 5 affordable units. It's pitiful. It's pitiful, in my opinion. So
I
I
think-
don't like any of this.
I don't want to get into the politics too much on that, Liz, but I would agree with you that over the years, the bonus density laws don't really incentivize a fair, what I would call a fair proportion of lower income. They certainly allow, and I think the concept is to allow the developer to make up their money on the moderate and above units, but it certainly allows for more housing. But the accusations have always been that more housing isn't what we need. We need more below moderate income housing.
Right. And the interesting thing on that point, you just said it, the developers have 30 more market rate units. Okay, so it's very pro-developer, not really. But the dense inclusionary ordinance, and I'm pretty sure I checked this recently, Brian, our inclusionary ordinance says 45 to 55 years on the deed. The density bonus, it has equity sharing, whereas the inclusionary ordinance don't. So it has equity sharing, which means someone can sell a density bonus BMR and split the profit with the city in 6 months or 6 years. There's no 45, 55 year low income designation. So it does not stay in the affordable housing category. So the city does all of this work to get all of these units built and they disappear. That's one of the other problems with density bonus. And that again is in another one of these.
Mhm.
Thoughts on support, opposition, watch?
Well, I wonder, if with this one or with, I certainly want to kind of raise those concerns, Mayor, and I know you've tried different venues. I wonder if this would be another one around the issues with the implementation of the density bonus.
Yeah, I would also say Skinner is known to have a lot of additions to her bills after the fact. One of the things she did on SB 330 is she made it retroactive. So one of the things we have to do is anytime we have a Skinner bill is to really track it carefully.
Okay, we'll watch this for the time being. SB 9, SB 10 were the two bills that were referred to by Councilmember Landry. There was a special interest group, and I forget the acronym, that sent her a communication. Margarita forwarded that on as a desk item because they were asking for us to take a position similar to theirs. The SB 9 allows for lot splits of single family residential properties as a ministerial approval. Normally that would go through a subdivision at the city, a parcel map. Although not complex, when it's 5 units or less, this would be ministerial. That would simply be probably surveying and documentation that they met the standards other than lot size and recording at the county. And then SB 10, fairly similar, but it's a projects of 10 or fewer, which is 10 is an odd number. Because when we talk about subdivision maps, usually we talk about 5 or fewer or 5 or more for purposes of environmental review. CEQA treats what I call 5 or less. Those are parcel maps versus tract maps at 5 or more. Traditionally in California, there's been a big distinguishment at the 5-unit level. So I'm not sure what the significance is of 10 units. I'd want to find out more on that, but it basically streamlines environmental review. Some would argue that that goes against CEQA, but CEQA has all kinds of legislative, exemptions and categorical exemptions in there. So I'm not so fussed with myself personally with streamlining environmental review for housing. I'm curious of why the 10 units was picked, and I'm wondering if there's something there that I'm not picking up on yet. So I'd want to research that a little bit more. Any thoughts on those two?
Sergio, I know that we've had informal conversations about units on a site and lot splits. And last year there were 2 pieces of legislation. One got watered down. Neither of them made it through, primarily because of the pandemic related to lot splits and so forth. I would just offer that, to me, we already know, for all intents of factual purpose, there is no such thing as an R1 lot anymore. All lots can have an ADU, and all lots can have a junior ADU or an apartment. So they are all R3 now. So with that in mind, this particular approach of putting 4 units, to me, sparks of being pro-developer, not really pro-housing. There's no affordable requirement here, and we can talk about ADUs as affordable units, which I think is a really important discussion, but set aside for that. I use my own house as an example. My house is desperately in need of doing something. It's original to 1946. The houses around me have been upgraded. My house and 1 or 2 others are original. So I could sell my house as a single family house for, say, $1 million. But if I know I can build 4 units on this and I want to sell it to a developer, I'm not going to sell it for $1 million. I'm going to sell it for $2.5 million. So the land value, Wiener in his public speeches has said he wants the land costs to be less. Okay. That's why he wants to subdivide R1 lots. Again, this is going back to previous speeches that he's given. And so to say that subdividing a lot is going to increase the number of units, one could debate whether it factually does. But 2, is it going to reduce the cost, i.e. the land cost? Not as much as one might think. It's a good example to me of people not thinking through what the implications of this are. Some of the information we received, which I thought was interesting, and I hadn't thought of. Yes, it's going to increase traffic. Yes, it's going to increase parking, because some of these have rules that say no parking is required if you subdivide, or you're within the ½ mile of a public transit stop. It's a lot of components that aren't worked out yet, but typically happen in Wiener's bills. But you could build a house, an apartment. It's not clear whether you could, instead of building, and this is what he was doing. He was saying previously that you could build 4 units on a parcel, and then you could sell them off later. So you could build a 4-plex, and then you could sell them off as tenancy in common or condos or whatever. Here, he's saying just subdivide the land. So it has a significant impact on the surrounding character, which I know is a difficult discussion. But is it really, what is it really achieving, and who's really benefiting? Is it just market rate units? And I know there's a big debate about build. But if you just build market rate units, I don't think you're really achieving anything. And our market rate unit vacancy is higher, a little less so right now, but higher than you might think. So
And when you say ours, you mean the city of Campbell?
yeah, we have an interesting number of units for sale. The single family homes are selling fairly quickly, but those not so fast. But primarily because, according to my real estate friends, because they're small and don't have outside spaces, kind of thing. So the marketplace has a lot to do with what's selling, and whether four units on a lot. And the other thing is, they don't say what size lot. You know, Campbell is the densest city in the county. And it's partially because we're on a flat and we're developed, as opposed to Los Gatos or Saratoga, which has hillsides, but we are densely developed. I think our average lot size is around 4,000 square feet, because we've done a lot of projects over the years with small developments, kind of thing. So I'm not sure what the real value is and how it would be implemented. It's a good example of one of the things that one size fits all kind of discussion. And I'm probably thinking of what the Cities Association notes are talking about. The City Association doesn't support laws that are one size fits all. So I'm connecting that in my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I absolutely appreciate that. I think like, you know, the comment that Brian made at the beginning, I can see the value of streamlining the environmental review process for housing bit. But appreciate some of those concerns. I also think that you know, some of these questions are going to be answered with just some of the moves that other cities are making. I think we'll have better data on some of these trends. So I, you know, certainly would be curious to see how it plays out there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what ABAG does and also what Cities Association does.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll watch both SB9 and SB10. SB 15.
And I'd flag just Brian, curious because the question raised also why 10 units, what the thinking on that.
Yes, we'll try to find that out.
I'll try and remember to ask that tonight and see if anybody at Cities Association comes up with it.
All right, SB 15 is a grant program to assist local governments in rezoning idle retail sites. That's great. I'm not sure that's something that's going to move our radar immensely right now, but if you're interested, we can address that.
On the city's notes, it says it requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to administer programs to provide grants.
Yeah, we would apply for a grant to rezone, and the work that would go into rezoning the site for workforce housing that would require a 55-year affordability term. For rental, 45 years for ownership. And while we may do that, I don't know this is higher on our priority list right now. I'm trying to think where it would apply. Certainly, you know, I'm thinking about the Fry's site. I'm thinking about big, you know, commercial sites that are vacant for a while. If we were to do even where the In-N-Out was going to go there, the Elephant Bar, or any of those, you know, the actual.
Sorry, pardon me. Go ahead, Brian.
No, that's all right. The act of rezoning itself is not complex, but if you were going to do it and do the housing and do the environmental review process and the community engagement process and the infrastructure planning, it can get complex. This just allows grants for that work.
Is there a definition in this for what this applies to? Is it any vacant commercial area, or is that, or just larger areas?
I would have to find out. I don't know the answer to that. We can find out.
I'd be curious how much this would actually apply to us, because a lot of the, especially, on the one hand, could see how it could be more relevant post COVID, but I also would think that a lot of those would be smaller sites, and this kind of sounds like it's getting at the larger ones.
I would agree with you. And I don't know what that size criteria is, but can you take that note, Andrea? Or I'm sorry,
Margarita.
Margarita.
Yeah.
I
So,
apologize.
I'm your
Yeah.
clerk today.
I'm sorry.
so I'm going to offer two sidebars on this. One is, to me, it comes back to a comment I've made on several of these. What is the value of having legislation that overrides the existing process, the existing legislative process, and the function of the Housing and Community Development Department for reviewing general plans and approving housing elements? If you have a housing element that documents your ability to meet your RENA assignment, why do you need bills that override the zoning that is not required to meet the housing needs? Why do you need it to override an approved housing element? To me, that's a big change. The other thing is, there is Evan Lowe's law from 2017, which poor Brian is tired of me mentioning, which is Assembly Bill 1397, Brian?
Yes.
That says parcels under half an acre can't count towards RENA, and in terms of planning, in terms of housing element, or parcels over 10 acres. It has an upper limit and a lower limit.
Yeah.
Which hurts Campbell because we have a lot of parcels that are half an acre or less. So this, to me, begs the question about where it would apply in Campbell and other laws.
And I think to your point, Liz, the problem with a lot of this isn't for the good actors, like I would argue Campbell is and other cities in our area. It's for the bad actors that perhaps zone it with the intent to really discourage housing, even though their intent is to allow for zoning, but they do it in a way that doesn't make that makes it impractical or infeasible or unlikely that things will be developed. And that was a lot of the legislation we saw in the last couple of years is really because of the bad actors, and that's unfortunate. That
and we get caught in it, and that's why the one size fits all is such
that's right.
Although this one, I appreciate that it's more of a carrot than a stick, which I think can often be a good thing. I have some of the same questions of how much it would actually apply to, but on the I would personally support if it can offer more resources for some of those things. And Mayor, I think to your question, some of this is that it's addressing these concurrent issues that they're all happening at the same time. While we're having to, do all these different processes like the housing element update. So I can see some of where that might be coming from.
Yeah, it's just, it adds a layer of bureaucracy. And one of the things that I think I'm correct on, but I must confess I probably should double check myself, is every city in this in the state is required to do a housing element in by January 2023. So everyone is already in the middle of updating their housing elements to the new RENA numbers. So to me, this might be valuable if it was passed under the current situation or current rules, but knowing they're all changing, to me, it's an awful lot of bureaucracy. But that's just a question, an open question.
So we'll keep moving.
Yeah.
SB 478 is a Wiener bill. This bill, I mean, this gets at the heart of local control. It does not allow cities for what I would call the smaller development size, 2 to 4 parcels or 5 to 10 to define minimum lot size that would be greater than what would be stipulated in this bill or under state law. So you could no longer say, for instance, on single family dwelling units or up to 4 units per acre, that you would need a minimum of 6,000 square feet. This bill could say that that exceeds the maximum allowed lot size, or the maximum allowed minimum lot size, if that makes sense. So it takes away our control to set minimum lot size for those density standards, is in essence what it does.
So we already do that. We already allow.
Yeah, so for instance, this could, and I don't know what the numbers are, I'd have to dig deeper, but for instance, on parcel zone for 2 to 4 units per acre, we would say on 4 units per acre, that'd be a minimum lot size of about 11,000 square feet, 10,000 some odd square feet. This law could say for single family dwelling units, you can't define minimum lot size exceeding 4,000 square feet.
But doesn't that conflict with some of the others that says that then you can build 4 units?
Yeah.
1,000 square foot lot. That's one of those that I keep picking up on.
Yeah, no, exactly. You got to figure out how this all works. But I think this gets at the heart of local control. It's taking away our ability to set minimum lot sizes in those density categories.
But to what purpose? Again, my question is, to what purpose? Is it just to build?
I would argue that's the case. I don't know, but
Is it to penalize? Is it to penalize Atherton and other communities, Saratoga? Is it to penalize them?
I think it gets at those. I think it gets at the Montessorinos and Athertons and Saratogas. I think that's exactly what it's doing. It's saying these 1 acre lot minimums. I mean, 60% of the zoning in Montessorino is 1 acre lot minimums. 60% of the city.
So Sergio, with your wonderful connections, why this? And how does it apply appropriately across all of the cities? And just look at Santa Clara County or broader, but why this? And to me, it reads like it's a penalty. It's trying to impose a penalty on certain cities. And
I think it does.
And how does it physically work? How does it physically work? I mean, as an architect, I keep thinking, how does it physically work?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian's right that a lot of this is unfortunately due to sometimes bad actors in this space, where I really don't think that Campbell falls into that. So I'm not sure what.
So how would we, representing our community? So this is a good question for both of us. How would I have a strong bias, clearly, to representing Campbell, because everything seems so much one size fits all. There may be great value in something like this. I think this is a bit extreme, but something like this, but applied judiciously as opposed to universally.
I just wonder what the judicious version of that is, how you would write that to give I mean, is there a version of this that with more flexibility that they could see value to?
Well, so the answer is I'm sure there is people more clever with words than I, but I would go back to what's the purpose? Is the purpose to penalize some cities? Is the purpose to just build? Is the purpose to provide affordable housing? Okay, so what are the pieces? And this is what I find missing in most of this legislation. They seem to be solving one problem, whether it's defined as a problem or an undercurrent. They never seem to be understanding of the whole pieces that set up a situation. So if this one is really trying to build more housing, and one of the solutions, a single perspective solution, is to make lots smaller, then you could do that, but what does that achieve? Does it achieve just more housing? Does it achieve affordable housing? Does it achieve housing near public transit? That kind of thing.
Well, and I, I think there's room for differences of opinion here, but I think there are a lot of folks who would argue that just the scale of the building that needs to be happening and where we're at is just such that you need a variety of tools in the toolbox, to use that analogy. So I think that's part of what it's getting at.
Yes, but how would this, the way this is worded right now, impact Campbell?
Well, I guess, Liz, ultimately is going to come down to what that unspecified number of square feet is that they say we can't exceed. We don't even know what that is and whether it's a reasonable number. If they were to say can't exceed 6,000 square feet, say, well, that would match our R16 zoning. That's probably not extremely unreasonable for those parcels. But if I were in Atherton, 6,000 square feet would cause me heart palpitations because they're all 1 acre zoning there. So we can find out more specifically what those numbers are. I don't know that they're defined yet.
To me, I agree. I'm fine to watch this, but I would just offer, and forgive me, Sergio, Wiener is always suspect because of his political connections with different business entities. And his bills all have a pro-developer, pro-housing aspect to them. So they have to be read really carefully. They are never, in my reading of them over these last 5-6 years, they never really support affordable housing. They're grand schemes. So I'm always dubious about what they actually say. And he's also very well known for there's a phrase. What's the phrase, Brian, where he switches it all out? He guts and amends.
An amend.
Amends things in the last 3 days. I'm always dubious about his bills.
Yeah, and I think there's room for a little bit of a difference of opinion here. I've actually seen, I think the bills often improve over the session. I think that he's actually open, in my experience, having conversations and adding more local control for good actors. So I'd hope that we can. Again, I don't know, just generally speaking, that we could have a little bit of input and help shape some of this for the better.
And you may well be right, and I appreciate that. I have met with Wiener personally. We have had actually I've met with him several times, but once personally. And we've had several conversations about good actors. And he says, I don't care. He came right out and said, I don't care. Congratulations for doing a good job, but I don't care. Direct quote, cross my heart, direct quote.
All right. So we'll find out some more on that one. And just to check on time, we're getting close to 3:30 here, and we have a few more pages. The next bill simply gives us more authority on setbacks for accessory dwelling units. There's probably a benefit to local control on that one.
Yeah.
That's a little bit easier for us. I don't know if you want to take a position to actually support it, but that allows us to go back to be able to define our setbacks from what currently is required of no more than 4 feet.
Yeah, I was going to say, right now it says 4 feet, does it not?
Yeah, and this would relieve that burden that was just put into place last year. Would you be interested in supporting that, or just leave it alone?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, at least to watch it. And
just watch.
well, I think I'm not too uncomfortable saying watch on a lot of these, Sergio, because we don't know enough yet.
Yeah.
Having the discussion is really helpful. So as we go forward and we track them and find when's the best place and time to have influence on them.
Yeah. And I'm very open to supporting this one. I can see the benefit locally. Do we have an author for this one?
Let's see. Stern.
Okay. And Brian, because you did mention time, I'm still flexible. I just want to make sure you're being respectful of everyone's time.
I've got to wrap up fairly quickly here, but I got a few more minutes.
That's okay. Well, why don't we stop at the transportation one? Let's do the transportation one and then stop and then agree to set up another meeting after the 18th, as soon after the 18th as we can. And we'll have an update from the Cities Association. I'll have an update from ABAG. And Sergio can have an update from his various groups. And let's see where we are.
And I just like to make a note. It doesn't. I mean, this does. We don't have to be bound by this, but with SB 555, where the author did reach out, so that's under revenue and taxation. They did request that if we're gonna support that they want it by the 17th. So we may decide not to, or we may decide to just watch, but just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, so I know McGuire. Yeah, I have not read this. Would it be acceptable if I studied this a little bit and also, what do you call it? So see what the Cities Association says tonight? And
Sure.
then,
I don't want to rush if anyone's uncomfortable with it. I think there's benefits to it.
So how do we know we got a letter of request on this?
They reached out to me. I passed it on to Margarita and Brian.
Okay,
and
so
I think I forwarded it to you this morning to make sure you had it as well.
Because I'm not aware of that one yet. Okay, so why don't we do this? We'll each take a look at it and study it and send our thoughts to Brian. And if there's a concurrence or a need for a quick conversation, I'm sure we can organize that. I would not like to write a letter of support on my own or a letter of non-support or non-response. I'd like to take advantage of the committee, even if we disagree.
So that one, Sergio, did I hear you say they were looking for some indication by the 17th?
That's correct.
So maybe we just circle back via email on that one, if that's appropriate. Certainly it affects local finances, certainly would be in our discretion. And I see some benefits, but I want to give Liz a chance to read that.
Yeah, and I don't want anyone to feel rushed or like they don't have enough background. Just wanted to.
Okay, so hold on a second. The bill would authorize a local agency to enact an ordinance exclusively delegating its authority to collect any transient occupancy tax imposed by local agency on short-term rentals in California and fees, and to enter into a contract with the Department of. Okay, so I might have big trouble with this. I've been mentioning this for quite some time. I think Campbell has missed an opportunity to charge TOT to our Airbnb kind of things, short-term rental things. And several cities around us, Sunnyvale for one, has recently passed an ordinance and signed an agreement, whatever it is, and to put TOT on short-term rental, which I think is essential. I'm not sure what this law says about it, so I'm interested in it. I strongly support doing it, so we'll see.
Yeah, so this doesn't change our ability to tax or untax. This allows us to delegate that authority if we are taxing it to have the state collect it on our behalf and remit it to us. But I'm not sure what the pass-through costs and the fees are, but
yeah,
it provides another mechanism for collection, I think.
So I just sent this to you, must have been Monday, sent this to you again, sent this to you and Will. And he knows the finance director at Sunnyvale, and he was going to chat with him about what Sunnyvale did. I would like some input from him on this, because Sunnyvale organized it so that they have no administrative costs. The taxes are paid directly by Airbnb, et cetera. So we need the state's involvement at all.
No, we may not need to. It's just another tool to collect it, I think.
And I think that would be a valuable conversation. I think that is a direct agreement with Airbnb, and the drawback of that is that it's a little bit tougher for the smaller you are, the tougher it is for them to have the incentive to enter into a session agreement. So this would make that a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So Liz, you want to look at that and maybe circle
I'll
back?
look at that and get back to you on that, but if we can, I'd appreciate Will's input.
I'll ask for that. I'll ask for him to review and provide written.
Just see where he's at,
Yeah.
where he's at on this. I think his input on this would be very helpful.
I agree.
Okay, and then quickly, the tax one for not the tax one, the
ETA.
BTA one.
Yeah, so this has to do with the makeup of the board.
Yeah.
So yeah, currently, as you know, it's a 12-member board that is composed of the appointees from the various cities within
So
the.
Margarita, we've all read this.
Perfect.
Sergio, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I'm concerned about, I mean, we're all familiar with the grand jury report, and, I see the benefit to some kind of reform. I'm concerned about accountability Campbell's ability to have an impact, and just generally, as a resident of the county, the ability to hold an unelected appointee accountable. So that's kind of, I think there's serious questions I'd want answered.
Okay, so my take is very similar to what happened at some legislation 2 years ago. Why should the entire state of California tell us how we should run the Santa Clara County Public Transportation and Congestion Management Group? It's none of the state's business. It's not LA's business. It's not Redding's business. It's not Sacramento's business. It's not Kern County's business. It's not San Francisco's business. It's Santa Clara County's business. So to have the entire state legislature vote to tell us how to manage our own transportation, I think is absolutely off the wall.
I question the special interest groups in that too, and the accountability of that would be in question. I'm not sure who Berman is and who's.
Oh, he's from Palo Alto.
Is he in Palo Alto?
Yeah, he's a big buddy of Evans.
Okay.
So your point is the same thing could happen to this board as it happened to in Santa Clara City, where what do you call it? The 49ers funded $4 million into the campaigns to change the city council, which defunded the police.
That's right. So that I don't know that this one falls clearly in our legislative ability to write a letter, but maybe this is one we want to circle back to the council on and get council input, or do you think there's justification within our policy direction?
Well, it reduces local control.
Well, it certainly does reduce local control, I guess.
And it directly impacts the city's finances, responsibilities, legal authority, because we elect and appoint to the board.
All right, I'm with you.
Safety and operations, I think it's with policy scope.
Okay. I can argue that with you.
Sergio, I'm not in support of it any way, shape, or form, but do you need some time to think about that?
I'm still more in the place of having positions. I'm also less sure that it's directly within the purview of the city. I think it's a little more, but I appreciate that perspective. So I think I'm leaning against it, but still have some questions.
You want to hold off? I'm fine to hold off.
I'm fine with that.
For a little bit and see what happens next.
Okay. Okay.
So just so you know, ABAG and MTC have been working very carefully with our dear friends at Silicon Valley Leadership Group to eliminate all in the 9 county areas to establish one transportation agency. They are working very hard on this. So I found this very odd. All right, so do we want to set up another meeting? You want to, Margarita, perhaps can send something out after the 18th when you have the other meeting?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
And I know Margarita and I think Brian are attending that as well, right?
Yep. Okay, we'll do that. And then Liz, if you'll circle back on the SB 555.
Yeah,
And I'll make sure to provide you with the finance director's review
appreciate that.
as soon as possible.
All
And
right.
and I also did, they reached out and wanted to, I'll forward you the email, Mayor, that they want to be very accessible and want to give the small cities a voice. So
Okay,
that's part of their outreach.
okay.
And that's helpful that we have a contact. So when we have questions, we get real answers. Sometimes it's hard to find the details,
Yes.
but a phone call goes a long ways.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I think we're good. If you're good, we'll go ahead and adjourn and we'll set up another time after the 18th.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Sergio. I always have a lot to say, but I tried really hard to let you speak.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Always
guys.
good to chat with you.